My name is Renee Castillo, and I'm 29 years old. Last Thanksgiving, in front of 21 members of my family, my mother laughed, raised her glass, and asked the whole table how it felt to be the disappointing daughter. She had a new watch on her wrist and a smile that never once reached her eyes. Here's the thing. 2 days earlier, I had quietly ended something I'd been carrying alone for 5 years. When the truth came out at that table, my father stood up so fast his chair tipped backward, and the question he asked split my family straight down the middle. My mother's smile died somewhere between the mashed potatoes and the cranberry sauce. That moment wasn't the end of the story, it was the fuse. Because what my father did after, what my sister found buried in her own bank statements, and what my mother finally admitted when she ran out of tears, none of us saw any of it coming. Welcome to Hearthly Stories, where family secrets come to light, and quiet people finally find their voice. If stories about standing up to the people who take you for granted mean something to you, stay to the end, because you will not want to miss what happens at this Thanksgiving table. Let me back up and show you what my life actually looked like last fall. I'm a veterinary technician, night emergency shift, 7 years at an animal hospital in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. I can hold a seizing dog steady with one hand and draw blood with the other. I know how to calm a panicked owner in under a minute. What I apparently could not do was read my own mother. I lived in a one-room apartment above a laundromat, with a hot plate instead of a real stove and a window that looked out on a parking lot. Dinner most nights was rice and canned beans, doctored up with whatever spice I had left. Not sad food, I want to be clear, I made it work. But cheap food, because cheap was what my budget allowed. My scrubs came from the discount bin. My car had 178,000 miles on it, and a check engine light that had become a permanent roommate. And every month in my banking app, there was a folder labeled Someday House. 5 years of night shifts should have filled that folder more than once. Instead, it stayed shallow, like a bathtub with the drain cracked open just enough to leak. Here's why. On the first of every month at exactly 6 in the morning, money left my account. A big, quiet, automatic bite. I had scheduled it for that hour on purpose, back when I first set it up, because at 6 a.m. I would already be at work, elbow deep in an emergency case, too busy to watch it happen. You don't schedule a payment for a time you can't witness, unless part of you already knows you shouldn't be making it. It took me 5 years to understand what that timestamp was really telling me. Where was all that money going? That is the part I have never said out loud until now. It was going to my mother. All of it. Her rent, her groceries, her car insurance. The entire quiet structure of her life ran straight through my checking account, and nobody in my family knew. It started 5 years earlier, 2 years after my parents divorced. I was 24. She called me over one night, sat me down at her kitchen table, and cried in a way I had never once seen. Hands shaking, makeup smeared. Your father left me with nothing, she said. I have $14 until Friday. So I loaded a grocery card for her that same night. That was the first domino. A year later, her car insurance lapsed, and I picked it up, because the idea of my mother driving around uninsured scared me more than the bill did. Then, 3 years ago, she found an apartment complex she loved, a place called Magnolia Court, with a courtyard fountain and a clubhouse, and she could not qualify for it on her own. So I signed as her guarantor, and the rent joined the 6 a.m. transfer. $980 a month at first. She had one condition, and she gripped my wrist when she said it. Don't you dare tell your father. Don't you dare shame me in front of this family. This stays between us. I told myself it was about dignity. Everyone deserves dignity, and she was my mother. So I ate my rice and beans, worked my doubles, and kept her secret like a good daughter would. 5 years I kept that secret, but it turned out that secret had two halves, and I was only holding one of them. My father was holding the other, and neither of us knew the same woman had handed both of us a version of the truth. To be fair to myself, I had 29 years of training for this. My mother, Marlene, never gave a gift that didn't come with a receipt she kept somewhere in her head. The bicycle I got when I was 8 resurfaced in arguments for a decade afterward. And I bought you that bicycle. My good report cards were never really mine. They were hers to pass around at church like a covered dish. When I made the honor roll, she told the women in her prayer group before she told me. Favors were loans. Kindness earned interest. When I was small, my grandmother would slip birthday money into my card, and my mother would fold the bills into her own purse on the drive home. For safekeeping, she would say, catching my eyes in the rearview mirror, and then she would deliver the line I grew up inside of. Love keeps a ledger, sweetheart. It always has. She said it the way other mothers said, drive safe. Years later, when the 6 a.m. transfers were bleeding me dry, I offered to sit down with her and build an actual budget. I am good with numbers. I track my grocery spending tighter than some clinics track their supply inventory. She looked at me like I had suggested she start digging through dumpsters. Budgets are for people with small, poor minds, she said, and stirred her coffee. That was the end of financial planning in my family. I want to be honest about something. None of this felt strange to me at the time. Fish don't know water is strange. I thought that was simply how mothers loved, how daughters were supposed to behave. It took me 29 years, one vacation photo, and a cracked leather notebook to learn exactly where my mother's arithmetic came from. We will get to the notebook. I still think about that notebook more than almost anything else in this story. Here's what I was quietly working toward through all of it: a small house. That was the entire dream. Nothing fancy, just a place with a patch of dirt for a garden, a kitchen where the morning light landed right, and a front door that locked behind a person nobody could send a bill to. I had gotten pre-approved for a modest mortgage the spring before all this happened. My realtor, Denise Okafor, was a retired schoolteacher, with a laugh like a screen door swinging open, and she had been patiently sending me listings for over a year. Your price range is a scavenger hunt, she liked to say, but I love a scavenger hunt. By my own math, 5 years of double shifts should have put a down payment to bed long ago. Instead, I was still thousands short, every single time. So I picked up extra weekend shifts and told Denise to keep looking. Meanwhile, the rest of my family orbited along beside me. My father, Gordon, 66, a retired welder, lived across the river in a small ranch house near my sister. He is the kind of man who might say 30 words in an entire day, but will drive an hour just to change your brake pads without being asked twice. My sister, Paige, 33, married to Mateo, 2 kids, works as a payroll accountant for the county. She loves hard but runs on fumes most weeks. Whenever I hinted that our mother was struggling, Paige would sigh into the phone. Mom has been dying dramatically since I was in middle school, Renee. Do not let her run you. Easy for her to say, since she wasn't the one holding the grocery cart. I never corrected her, because correcting her meant explaining everything, and explaining meant breaking the one rule I had sworn to follow. So I smiled, swallowed it, and picked up another shift. Then, one Tuesday in September, halfway through my shift, my phone lit up against the break room table. Mom. And underneath her name, one word: emergency. The emergency, when I arrived at her apartment the next morning, turned out to be this: her car insurance was about to lapse. It was not. I had already paid it. I checked from her parking lot, and a $540 medical bill she waved at me, folded up like a paper fan. I asked to see it, calmly, the same way I would ask any pet owner for paperwork at the clinic. And I want you to understand, I had asked before many times. I had requested statements. I had offered to go to the bank with her. I had offered twice to sit with her, and a free credit counselor from the library. Every single request triggered the exact same 3-act play. Act 1, tears, my own daughter, auditing me like I am a criminal. Act 2, shame, you count pennies against your mother after everything I sacrificed to give you life. Act 3, the closer. Ever since her one overnight stay in the hospital 2 years earlier for observation, she had walked out with what amounted to a lifetime membership in that particular threat. She would press her hand flat against her chest, look at me with wet eyes, and say, "Push me on this, and you can explain to everyone why I ended up back in that hospital bed. Is that really what you want?" So no, I did not see the actual bill. I transferred the $540 from her hallway, standing right there on her welcome mat. And as I turned to leave, I noticed a stiff paper shopping bag sitting by the coat closet, cream tissue paper blooming out of the top, the kind of bag I had only ever seen at the expensive counters inside the mall. My mother slid it behind the coats with her heel, smooth as a dance step, like she had done it 100 times before. That weekend, I drove out to see my father so he could look at my brakes. This is how Gordon Castillo shows love. He puts your car up on ramps, disappears underneath it for an hour, and slides back out with grease on his elbows and a full diagnosis ready. While he worked, he squinted up at me. "You look thin," he said. "You sleeping?" "I work nights, Dad. I sleep in shifts like a submarine crew," he grunted, which is his version of a laugh. And then, wiping a wrench with a rag, not even looking up at me, he said the sentence that started the earthquake, even though neither of us felt it yet. "Hard to picture your mother struggling, whatever your Aunt Sherry keeps saying. Your mother is set." I made sure of that when we sold the house on Larkspur. I stood there in his cold driveway, holding a wrench I had somehow forgotten I was still holding. Set. He said it the way you would state a fact about concrete. My mother's version, the one I had been quietly funding for 5 years, was $14 until Friday. Your father left me with nothing. 2 people I loved were telling me 2 completely different stories about the exact same divorce, and both of them clearly believed themselves. I opened my mouth. I actually felt the question sitting there, round and heavy as a stone. How much, Dad? What did she actually get? But I had promised, and if I asked, he would ask why I wanted to know, and the whole thing I had been carrying for 5 years would come crashing down on a random Saturday afternoon between brake pads and a wheel well. So I swallowed the stone and said nothing. I work with animals for a living, and here is something that job teaches you. When a reading does not match the symptoms, you do not argue with the monitor, and you do not argue with your gut. You take the measurement again, by hand, at the source. 2 weeks later, Denise called me, out of breath. A small brick two-bedroom had just hit the market, an estate sale, motivated sellers, gone by Friday kind of deal. If you want a real shot at this one, I need you ready with earnest money fast, she said. This is the one that will not wait, Renee. I sat at my counter that night after my shift, 2 in the morning, and did the math on the back of a receipt. I could make it work, barely, if I skipped 1 month of my mother's rent, one single month. Or cracked open my emergency fund and walked a tightrope with no net underneath a night shift technician's income. I sat there a long time. My apartment was so quiet I could hear the mini fridge thinking. And then the calendar flipped to the first of the month. And at 6 in the morning, while I was holding down a frightened German shepherd for an x-ray, the transfer went out exactly like it always did. On time, obedient. $1,180, plus everything else. Because somewhere along the way, I had decided her roof mattered more than my own front door. Nobody made me do that. That is the ugly, useful truth I can admit now. The bars of my own cage were self-installed, and I had polished every one of them. The little brick house sold in 48 hours to a young couple who, according to Denise, cried in the kitchen out of pure joy. I told her congratulations and meant almost all of it. Then I worked 4 nights straight and did not let myself think, which is a skill you can get frighteningly good at. On the 5th night, a little after midnight, my cousin Priya texted me a screenshot, 3 question marks. Then, wait, isn't this your mom? I opened the picture. White sand, turquoise water, a swim-up bar, and there was my mother. The screenshot had come from my Aunt Sherry's photo album, posted publicly for the whole extended family to admire. 6 days in Cancun. I scrolled through it on my break, my back against a supply closet shelf. There was my mother in a wide-brimmed hat, clinking a giant cocktail glass against my aunt's. My mother on a catamaran, laughing with her whole head thrown back. My mother and Sherry in matching cover-ups, toes in the sand, caption reading, sister's trip, long overdue. I did the timeline without even wanting to. Those 6 days were the exact week, 1 month earlier, when my mother had told me, in a small brave voice, that she would be away at a church retreat, somewhere cheap. Don't worry about me, she'd said. I remembered that call clearly because I had offered to cover the retreat fee myself, and she had said, "You already do enough, sweetheart." I had hung up feeling guilty that she felt guilty. Standing in that supply closet, I ran through every excuse a loyal daughter could reach for. Maybe Sherry paid for everything. Maybe it was a gift. Maybe the photos were old. But there it was, in one of the pictures, sitting on the hotel bed, like a member of the family. The same cream tissue paper bag. Here is something else this job teaches you. You do not call anyone or confront anyone while you are still shaking. You finish the shift. Meds administered, vitals recorded, one frightened animal walked back down from panic. And then you drive home through empty streets. Sit down at your kitchen counter and start taking your own vitals. I want to be precise about what I did next, because precision was the only thing I had left. I did not snoop through my mother's accounts. I could not have, and I would not have. I opened my own statements, my own history, my own quiet 6 a.m. bite, going back 5 full years. I made coffee at 3 in the morning and built a spreadsheet, because apparently when my life catches fire, I respond with columns. 5 years of grocery cards, loaded and reloaded. 4 years of car insurance premiums. 3 years of rent at Magnolia Court, $980 a month, and then a date I noted, filed, but did not yet understand. A jump to 1180 a month about a year back, explained to me as a building-wide increase. Inflation, the world is cruel. I added the emergencies, the 540 seconds, the 380 seconds, the furnace repair that may or may not have involved an actual furnace. When the last cell filled in, I sat back and looked at the total, and the total looked right back at me. $86,400. I am going to let that number sit here for a second, because I had to. $86,400 out of a vet tech's take-home pay, shift by shift, while my someday householder starved and little brick houses sold to couples who cried tears of joy in kitchens that were never going to be mine. I did not feel rage yet. That came later, and honestly, it never arrived the way you would expect. What I felt at that counter was closer to standing at the foot of an x-ray, finally seeing the fracture that explained 5 years of limping. I tore a sticky note off the pad, wrote one question on it, and pressed it onto my refrigerator at eye level. Not the total. I did not need the total anymore, just the question. What did you actually buy? Because deep down, some part of me already knew the answer, and the answer was never groceries. I decided to give her one clean chance. Not an ambush, an off-ramp. I invited her to coffee at the little place near her complex, the one with the scones she likes, and I rehearsed kindness in the car like a speech. When I sat down, I did not mention Cancun, or the bag, or the spreadsheet sleeping in my laptop bag. I said, Mom, I am worried about how the money works. Let me help you build a real plan. A budget, maybe a smaller place. I will go with you to every appointment, you and me. She stirred her latte for a moment. Then she performed a small wounded laugh for the benefit of the next table over. Sherry paid for that trip, you know, she said, though I had not brought it up at all, which told me my cousin's screenshot had already made its full lap around the family. You would know that if you ever actually called your aunt. Was I supposed to embarrass this family by saying no? Move one, gaslight, seamless as silk. Then she set down her spoon and looked at me with something close to delight. Oh, I see. You are keeping score now. Love keeps a ledger. Is that what we are doing, Renee? Move two? She took the exact sentence she had raised me inside of and handed it right back to me as an accusation. I actually felt the glass walls of that aquarium for the first time in my life. Then, without missing a beat, move three. Christmas is coming up. I will need $650 for gifts, unless you would like your own mother to be the only one with nothing under the tree. And here is where 5 years finally cracked open. I did not say yes. I did not reach for my phone to transfer it while she watched, the way I always had. I heard myself say, let me think about it. The silence that followed lasted maybe 3 seconds. Those 3 seconds told me everything about the true price of thinking in my family. It took under 48 hours for the artillery to find my exact coordinates. First came Aunt Sherry, calling at dinner time, her voice already tuned to the key of grief. Renee, after everything your mother has sacrificed, she calls me in tears saying you snapped at her over coffee. About money, at Christmas. I noted quietly that in this version I had snapped, and the $650 had somehow become a mood I had inflicted rather than an invoice I had received. Then Paige texted, running between a work meeting and her son's soccer practice. What happened between you and Mom? Can you just call her back? She is spiraling and blowing up my phone, and it is the worst possible week for this, please. Not one single person asked me a question. That is the actual design of the machine. I understand that now. The phone tree does not gather facts, it distributes verdicts. I went to work that night with my jaw aching from clenching it so hard. And then the night shift, as it sometimes does, handed me a mirror. A young golden retriever came in after being hit by a car, and his owner had been sitting in the waiting room chair for hours, refusing every offer of coffee or a blanket. Around 2 in the morning, I found her asleep sitting straight up, one hand resting through the kennel bars on the dog's paw, like she was holding a door closed against the dark. She had never once raised her voice at us. She had never once told anyone what she was owed. I stood there in the dim light with the monitor beeping softly, and I looked at what love actually costs when nobody is keeping a receipt for it. I draped a spare blanket over her shoulders and went out into the hallway and stood very still for a long time, doing arithmetic that no spreadsheet could ever hold. The first of the following month fell on my day off. Instead of watching the 6 a.m. transfer go out automatically, I switched it that month to a money order and drove it over to Magnolia Court myself. Small act of control, like straightening sheets on a bed you cannot yet leave. The lobby smelled like cinnamon pine cones, a gas fireplace crackling, a player piano tinkling away for nobody. The leasing manager, Mr. Whitaker, knows me well, since I am the guarantor on the lease and my name is on every check. To him, I am not the daughter, I am the account. He took the money order with a wide smile. Right on time as always, he said, and how is everyone loving the upgrade? That 2-bedroom with the den and the attached garage, that floor plan is honestly my personal favorite. I kept my face pleasant, my work face, the one I use when a reading comes back that cannot possibly be right, except it is. Remind me when that switch happened, I said, light as anything. He tapped at his keyboard. About 14 months ago, he said. Went from the 1-bedroom straight to the Cambridge floor plan. That is exactly where the difference in rent came from. About $200 a month. $200 a month. The building-wide increase. The inflation. The world is cruel. My mother had not been drowning at all. She had been adding a den and a garage to the boat and mailing me the fuel bill. I thanked Mr. Whitaker, walked past the fireplace and the piano playing to an empty room, and stood in the parking lot doing the stillest kind of screaming I have ever done in my life. My mother was not struggling, she was redecorating. I want to pause here, because some of you already know this exact feeling. Standing somewhere nice, learning that your sacrifice was quietly funding someone else's spending money. If that moment has ever found you, tell me in the comments what finally gave it away for you. And subscribe, because what I did next, I did very, very quietly. I did not drive straight home from Magnolia Court. My hands needed somewhere to steer that was not my mother's courtyard fountain. So I looped past a listing Denise had texted me that morning with a row of exclamation points. Hollyhock Lane, and there it was. A little house painted the pale yellow of an old kitchen from a cereal commercial. One story, a faded picket fence, gutters that needed love. At the curb stood a mailbox on a wooden post, knocked crooked by some long-forgotten bumper and never straightened, tilted in a way that looked less like damage and more like a wave hello. Denise met me there in 20 minutes flat, 'cause Denise is Denise. Inside, creaky oak floors, a kitchen older than I am, an afternoon light falling across the empty dining nook so exactly that I could see a table there, and chairs, and people who came because they wanted to. Nobody had upgraded this house in decades. It did not apologize for a single thing. I stood in that light-soaked kitchen with my coat still buttoned, and something in my chest unclenched a full notch, like the first breath of air after holding it through a tunnel. I walked out front, took a photo of the crooked mailbox, and set it as my phone's lock screen right there on the sidewalk. Denise watched me do it and grinned. "That is a symptom," she said. "I have seen it before. There is no cure. I want this one," I told her. "Give me until December." She went quiet, doing her own math on my finances, which she knew almost as well as I did. "December is tight, Renee." "I know," I said, still looking at the mailbox. "Give me until December anyway." I did not know yet exactly where the money would come from. I only knew with total clarity where it was finally going to stop going. Before I tell you what I did next, I need to tell you about the notebook, because it is the entire reason I handled things the way I did. A week after the leasing office, my mother summoned me over to move a dresser. No apology offered, just "I need you Saturday. Wear real shoes." That was normal. My visits always came with a job attached. While we were walking the dresser away from the wall, something slid off the back edge and hit the carpet. A small leather notebook, spine cracked, cover soft as an old wallet. It fell open on its own. The handwriting stopped me cold, 2 hands on the very same pages. One was slanted and strict, fountain pen, my grandmother Opal's, gone now 14 years. The other was rounded and careful, a teenager's, my mother's. 2 columns marched down every page. Oud new shoes, $3.50. Piano lesson, $1. Doctor visit, $4. Winter coat, and across from it, repaid. Ironing for the Hendersons. Silence at the dinner table, Saturday chores. Page after page after page. My mother crossed the room faster than I have ever seen her move, and pulled it straight out of my hands, and for one unguarded second, before the mask reassembled itself, I watched my 57-year-old mother become a 15-year-old girl again, standing in front of her own mother, waiting to hear exactly what today had cost her. "I paid your grandmother back every single penny by my wedding day," she said quietly, almost proud, almost pleading. "It is the only completely true thing I am certain she has ever told me." Then her chin came up, the room reset, and the voice I knew so well returned, like a key turning back into a lock. "Love keeps a ledger, sweetheart. It always has." Standing there between the dresser and the wall, I finally saw the whole chain, link by link, running from my grandmother's fountain pen, through my mother's careful teenage column, straight down to a sticky note on my own refrigerator. I felt sorry for her, I still do, but a chain is exactly what it was. And understanding where she learned to collect debts did not obligate me to keep on paying them. Here is what I did not do, and believe me, the temptation showed up nightly. I did not screenshot the vacation photos and forward them to my father with a red circle drawn around them. I did not stand up at a family dinner with a printed spreadsheet. I did not steal one single drop of her medicine, the tears, the phone tree, the audience. If I beat my mother at her own game, the game simply continues, just under new management. I wanted out of the entire casino, so I built a door instead of a bomb. At work, I cornered Marisol, our clinic's part-time client resource coordinator, who has spent 15 years helping families figure out care and money without anybody bleeding out in the process. I asked her a hypothetical question that fooled her for exactly 0 seconds. She walked me through it anyway, over vending machine coffee on our break. What a 57-year-old woman with Social Security on the near horizon could actually afford on her own, which senior living communities nearby were decent, safe, and genuinely pleasant, 3 of them with waitlists measured in weeks rather than years. how a session with a financial counselor actually works, and the detail that mattered most to me, that I could pay the counselor directly, support without cash changing hands, a bridge with real guardrails. Marisol slid the printouts across the table and used a clinical phrase for what I had been doing for 5 years, the enabling kind. I stopped her right there. I do not need a term for it, I said. I need a spine. Turns out those are free. She laughed, and then she said the thing I have repeated to myself 100 times since. You cannot budget someone out of a belief, Renee. You can only stop funding the belief. That night, I bought a sturdy craft envelope and filled it. 3 apartment listings, a counselor's card with an appointment already paid in full, and a handwritten page listing everything I was offering instead of money, my Sundays, my help moving, my actual presence. But before Saturday came, I did something I should have done years earlier. I told my sister. Paige sat at my counter after her kids were finally down, and I opened my laptop and walked her through it. My own statements, nothing stolen, nothing spied on. 5 years of grocery cards, 4 years of insurance, 3 years of rent with a mysterious jump, then the upgrade, the den, the garage, the trip. My sister is an accountant. I watched her read the way accountants read, and I watched the color drain slowly out of her face. Renee, she finally said, very carefully. Mom owes me $2,750. The whole room seemed to tilt. Small loans, she said. A furnace thing, a dental thing, a bridge until the first of the month, then another bridge. Never once repaid, always urgent, and every single time, a sigh about how Paige was the only one she could really count on. Because your sister never helps me, Renee. She has her own little life. You know how she is. I sat there, hearing my mother's exact voice describe a daughter who never helps, while my own 6 a.m. transfers marched silently across the screen between us. She had kept us in separate rooms the entire time and told each of us that the other one was empty-handed. Paige was ready to burn the whole thing down that same night. She wanted the spreadsheet printed out, stapled, and read aloud at Thanksgiving like a quarterly report. This is where she and I gently split. No, I told her, I am not going to do to her what she has spent her whole life doing to me. No audience, no ambush. I am simply going to stop. Paige stared at me, jaw working, then finally exhaled, squeezed my hand and said, okay, your call. But I am done covering for her, and if it comes up at my table, I will not lie for her either. 2 days later, the phone tree delivered its official bulletin. Mom would be attending Thanksgiving at Paige's house, and she was bringing, quote, an announcement. The shape of that announcement was not hard to guess, since Aunt Sherry had already previewed it to anyone holding a phone. Mom was seriously considering moving to Arizona to be near her sister, somewhere warm, for her health. And here was the load-bearing sentence. She will need the kids' help getting set up. Getting set up. I had heard that exact phrase before in my father's driveway about a house on Larkspur Street. Though I still did not fully understand what it meant, I was starting to understand that in my family, getting set up was a bill that always somehow found its way to one particular mailbox. That same week, the SUV appeared. I saw it when I dropped off her groceries. I had kept doing the groceries the whole time I was quietly building my exit, because you do not stop feeding someone the exact week you finally find your spine. Those two things simply are not related. There it sat, in her numbered parking spot, a brand new SUV, dealer plate still attached, gleaming like a fresh tooth. Least I would learn later. She caught me looking and got out ahead of it, the way she got out ahead of everything. The old car was not safe, she said, arms crossed against the cold. Not that any of my children ever check on that. If something happened to me on the highway, then maybe you would all finally pay attention. I stood there holding her grocery bags, at that exact moment, an actual still life of the entire arrangement, and I felt the last flicker of doubt inside me go out quietly, like a pilot light. She was never in trouble. She had never once in 5 years actually been in trouble. She had a lifestyle, and the lifestyle had a staff, and the staff was me. The Saturday lunch was set. The envelope sat on my counter, like a passenger already waiting for a train, and the night before, after my shift, I did the thing I do. 2 in the morning, kitchen counter, 1 lamp, 1 sheet of paper. Left column, the yellow house. Denise needed earnest money in December to hold the deal together. The sellers were patient, but not infinite. My emergency fund could cover it, barely, if the 6 a.m. bite finally stopped. Right column, the bite. Rent, groceries, insurance, Christmas, Arizona, and whatever came after Arizona, because something always came after. I looked from one column to the other, and up at the sticky note on the refrigerator, faded now from months of kitchen sunlight. What did you actually buy? And for the first time, I answered it out loud, alone in my empty apartment, in the voice I use for hard news at 3 in the morning. I was not buying her groceries, I said. I was buying proof that I was worth keeping. There it was. 5 years of transfers, and not one of them had ever really been about rent. Rent was just the invoice. The actual product was her approval, sold monthly, price rising every year, satisfaction never once included. $86,400. Trying to purchase a mother who would look at me the way that dog owner looked at her sleeping animal. For free, at 2 in the morning, asking nothing in return. You cannot buy that anywhere. It is not for sale. And the people willing to sell it to you are always the ones who never actually had it in stock. Saturday came, and wore real shoes. I did not do it at the coffee shop. I did it at her own table because she deserved that much privacy, even though she had never once granted me the same courtesy. She made tea. She was in a good mood since the phone tree had reported me as fully docile again. I set the craft envelope down between us, and I said it the way Marisol had coached me. No cushioning, no apology built into the foundation. Mom, starting December 1st, I will no longer be paying your rent, your groceries, or your car insurance. Her cup stopped halfway to her mouth. I kept going, level as a monitor tone. In that envelope are 3 apartments you can genuinely afford on your own, a counselor's card, the first session already paid for, and a page in my own handwriting, listing what I will still do. Sundays, moving day, doctor visits. Me, Mom, you still get me. You just no longer get my paycheck. The silence that followed had actual texture. I watched her run through the usual keys. The eyes went glassy on cue, then dried out fast when they found no audience to perform for. Her hand rose toward her chest, then thought better of it halfway there. What settled onto her face instead was something I had never once been allowed to see directly. Cold, clear calculation. The teenager from that ledger, fully grown now, doing the day's arithmetic in real time. You will be nothing to this family, she said finally, each word placed down like a coin. I will make certain of it. By Christmas, they will not even say your name in your sister's house. I stood, pushed my chair back in, and left the envelope right where it lay. She did not so much as glance at it while I was still in the room. She did not scream, did not cry, did not call after me down the hallway. That silence frightened me more than any performance ever had. 2 days before Thanksgiving, I sat across from Mr. Whitaker one last time and signed the paperwork that took my name off the lease as guarantor, effective January 31st. I could not undo the signature I had given 3 years earlier, so if she missed a payment before then, the complex could still legally come to me, and I set money aside just in case. But I do not make threats, and I do not leave a mess behind me. What I could do was refuse to renew the chain going forward. Then I drove home to my apartment, sat on my bed with my phone, and opened the banking app. There it was, where it had lived for 3 years straight. Auto pay, the first of the month, 6 a.m. My thumb hovered over that toggle, longer than it has ever hovered over anything at work, and I have pressed buttons with actual lives on the other side of them. 5 years, gone with a single tap. The switch slid from green to gray, and the app, bless it, asked me, "Are you sure?" Honey, I have never in my life been more sure of anything, with worst possible timing. Toggle done. Inside the 9 quiet days that followed, 2 things happened, one cold and one warm, and I carried them around in opposite pockets like stones. The cold one, Aunt Sherry sent out a group text to the entire family, no names attached, which was the whole art of it. A long paragraph about children who abandoned their mothers right before the holidays. My sister replied to the group with a single thumbs up on an unrelated grocery question, then privately texted me, held the line, "You are coming Thursday, bring your rolls, ignore the shelling, the warm one." On Monday, I drove to the title company on my lunch break and wired $2,500 in earnest money. By Wednesday morning, Denise called me, singing into the phone. Offer accepted. Closing set for February. The little yellow house on Hollyhock Lane was, pending paperwork and a small miracle, actually going to be mine. Wednesday evening, the artillery finally spoke, and it spoke in perfume. My phone rang. My mother, voice bright as tinsel, as if our last conversation at her table had simply never happened. "See you Thursday, sweetheart. Bring your rolls. Everyone is coming, everyone." She leaned gently on that last word, the way you would test a floorboard you already knew was loose. Thanksgiving at my sister's house is a production with a cast of 21. The good tablecloth, a folding table bolted on at the end for the cousins, the kids' card table set up in the den. My father in his one nice sweater, parked at the quiet end, sneaking his grandson black olives to wear on his fingers. I brought my rolls, because I always bring my rolls, and I set them down with hands that mostly did not shake. My mother arrived 40 minutes late, which was standard, late enough to make an entrance, never so late as to miss it entirely. New coat, fresh blowout, a bag riding her forearm like a small trophy. She hugged her way down the room person by person and gave me the version with no arms in it at all. Grace was said, Plates were loaded, and then, right on schedule, the show began. A sigh first aimed at Sherry, but pitched for the whole table. I manage everything completely alone now, she said. That is what I have learned this year. You truly learn who your children are once you get old. I ate my green beans. But here is what nobody else at that table seemed to notice. My father, at the quiet end, had gone completely still, fork down, eyes fixed on his ex-wife, wearing the exact frown he reserves for an engine that is telling him one thing on the gauge and something entirely different through the floor. It was my young nephew who lit the fuse, without knowing it at all, somewhere between second helpings and the pie. Aunt Renee, how is the house hunt going? He called down the table. Any luck? I kept it small. I had planned to keep the whole day small. Actually, yes, I said. I found one. It is little and yellow, and the mailbox is crooked, and I love it completely. A warm ripple ran around the table. My father's face broke open into the first full smile I had seen on him in over a year, and my sister squeezed my knee under the tablecloth. For about 4 seconds, it was the nicest moment my family had produced in a decade. Then I heard my mother set her fork down onto her plate, one sharp, precise click of metal on china, and I knew, the way you know a monitor is about to alarm, that the spotlight had wandered off her, and she intended to get it back. She laughed, loud and bright, and aimed directly at me. A house, she said. You can barely keep yourself alive in that little room you rent, Renee. You bring store-bought rolls and drive a car that sounds like a blender full of rocks. She looked around, gathering her audience the way she gathered absolutely everything, and then leaned forward, eyes shining, and dropped it with the tenderness of a guillotine. How does it feel to be the disappointing one, daughter? 21 people, one oven timer ticking somewhere out in the kitchen, a neighbor's dog barking once, far away. Nobody breathed. My mother sat back with her drink and smiled at me, warm as a heat lamp, waiting to be handed exactly what she believed she was owed. I want to tell you what I felt in that silence, because it surprised me then, and it still surprises me now. Not rage, not tears climbing my throat. What I felt was the quiet of a room where a decision has already been made, where the surgery already happened, and this is simply the bandage finally coming off. I set my napkin down beside my plate. I looked at my mother, really looked at the blowout, the bag, the shine in her eyes that I had personally financed for years. And I heard my own voice come out level and almost kind. Feels great, I said, since I just stopped paying your rent. The words landed in the middle of the table like something dropped from a great height. My mother's smile did not fall right away. It froze, stuck to her face a half second past its expiration, which is somehow so much worse to witness. Then it slid off all at once, leaving nothing behind it but arithmetic. Down the table I heard it, before I even saw it. The scrape of my father's chair as he shot straight up onto his feet. 61 years old, napkins still tucked into his collar, his voice filling the entire dining room the way it had not since I was a child. Rent. What rent? And the table detonated into that impossible stillness, where 17 other people all seemed to stop existing at once. My sister was already moving, hurrying the kids toward the den with promises of a movie and pie at the card table. My mother looked from me to my father, and I watched her do something I had never once seen her do in front of family. She hesitated. Renee pays my rent, my mother said finally, choosing the tone of a woman explaining something tedious to hired help. Children help their mothers, Gordon, not that you would ever understand family. How long? My father said. It was not really a question the second time either. How long, Renee? So I told him. No spreadsheet, no phone, no raised voice, just the facts laid out plain like instruments on a tray. 5 years, Dad. Groceries first, then her car insurance, then her rent for the last 3 years. I signed as her guarantor at Magnolia Court. Last year the rent went up because she moved into a bigger unit, 2-bedroom, den, attached garage. And in September, she spent 6 days in Cancun and told me she was at a church retreat in Indiana while I covered everything back home. Each sentence hit my father somewhere I could not see. He gripped the back of his chair until the wood groaned, then turned to face my mother, his voice low and cracked and terrible. Marlene, I gave you $164,000. Every single cent from the Larkspur house. I kept the pension small on purpose so our girls would never have to carry you. He looked around the table at a room full of family, learning 2 secrets at once, then back at her. Where did it go? For a moment my mother sat perfectly still. Then the machine found its lever and the tears arrived, right on cue, glistening for the cheap seats. You would throw money in my face on Thanksgiving, she said. I am your mother. I gave you life. You owe me everything. Arizona would have fixed all of it if you weren't so selfish. And there it was, the announcement, dead on arrival in its true shape. An invoice. What happened next is the part I had somehow rehearsed for my whole life without ever realizing it. My mother stood, pressed both hands flat onto my sister's good tablecloth, and summoned the full church voice, the one that filled sanctuaries and quieted pharmacists, and played the very last card left in her deck. Fine, she said. You want to count pennies against your own mother. Then choose, Renee. You walk out that door, you are no daughter of mine. Not at Christmas, not at my funeral, not ever. Choose. The room held its breath for me, and I looked at her. I made myself really look, and here is what I finally saw. Not the mother I had been paying for. 5 years, a monthly installment on a woman who might someday look back at me the way that dog owner looked at her sleeping animal. That mother was never actually going to be delivered. She did not exist. There was only this one, 57 years old, magnificent, terrified, standing on a tablecloth battlefield entirely of her own choosing, offering me one final chance to buy her. I stood up too, not fast. I pushed my chair in behind me, because my sister's floors are nice. The counselor's appointment is already paid for, I said, and my voice stayed level, and hers never quite would again. The apartment list is still on your table. That offer does not expire, Mom. You can have my Sundays. You cannot have my paycheck. I picked my coat up off the hook by the door. Behind me her voice climbed, cracked, went shrill, in a way I had never once heard in public. Love keeps a ledger, Renee. It always has. I stopped in the doorway and handed the family arithmetic back to her, one last time gently, the way you close a chart. Then I am paid in full. I did not slam the door. I pulled it shut with a soft click and the cold air took me. I made it as far as the porch steps before my father came down beside me, staring out at the frozen lawn like it owed him something. My dad has maybe 30 words a day in him, and he had spent half of them shouting. So what he said next, he said slow, I made sure your mother's was set. Prided myself on it for years, never once checked who was setting you. He put his hand on my shoulder, heavy as a toolbox, and left it there, and that was the whole speech, and it was enough. Then my sister came out with no coat, holding a plate wrapped in foil. You are not driving home hungry, that is not happening tonight, she said, pressing it into my hands. And Sunday, my kids are helping you pack up that apartment. Sophia already called dibs on the tape gun. I hugged my sister, hugged my father, got into my loud little car, and did not drive straight home. I drove across town, cut the engine on Hollyhock Lane, and sat in the dark looking at a crooked mailbox in my own headlights. My phone lit up, Mom, a voicemail, 38 seconds long. I sat with my thumb over the play button for a long moment, the way you pause before pulling back addressing. Then I played it, once, all the way through, fury first, then briefly unbearably sweetness. You were always my little shadow, my good girl, and if she had stopped right there, I might have cried in that dark car. She did not stop there. It closed with the toll booth. Fix this by Sunday, or do not ever call me again. I did not call back. I typed one text instead, the counselor's name, the date and time of the appointment already paid for, and one more line underneath it. The offer still stands. Send. Then I turned my phone face down on the passenger seat and looked at the little yellow house, dark and patient behind its crooked mailbox. For 5 years I had paid every month to feel worth keeping. That night, parked outside a house that did not even know me yet. For free, for nothing, I felt like I was already home. December 1st came, and for the first time in 3 years, 6 a.m. arrived and took absolutely nothing from me. I worked that morning. Some between one task and the next, nothing happened. And nothing has ever felt so much like something. Here is what December actually proved. The rent at Magnolia Court got paid on time, in full, on January 2nd. Mr. Whitaker never once called me. My mother, who supposedly could not survive without me, wrote those checks herself, from money that it turns out had been sitting there the entire time. The money was never missing, only the excuse was. When the lease ended January 31st, she did not renew it. She moved into a one-bedroom at a senior community across town, one of the exact 3 places from a certain craft envelope, though she would sooner die than admit that out loud. The SUV went back once its lease allowed. She kept the bag. She attended exactly 1 session with the counselor I had already paid for, declared the woman dim and disrespectful, and never went back. My mother did not transform. People mostly do not. She adapted magnificently, unbeatably, and the family ledger she carries stayed open, just no longer on my page. Never again on my page. I closed on the yellow house the 3rd week of February, in a title office with terrible coffee and a pen chained to the desk, which struck me as funny, after everything, that they still thought somebody might try to steal the pen. The keys weighed nothing and everything at the same time. My father showed up that first Saturday without being asked, toolbox already in the truck bed, and rebuilt the rotten porch steps in a single afternoon. He barely said a full sentence the whole day, and every single board was love, measured twice. That Sunday, my sister's kids came over with the tape gun, found the paint shelf out in the garage, and begged to redo the mailbox. When I came out with lemonade, they had repainted it fresh, but left it crooked on purpose. Dead serious about the decision. It looks like it's waving, Sophie explained. It stays crooked forever. In April, a birthday card arrived in that mailbox, in handwriting I would know anywhere. Thinking of you, Mother. No apology, no invoice attached. I stood at the curb a while, then set it on the windowsill, where it still sits today. A crack in a wall is not a door, but twice a month on Sundays I still drive her to the grocery store. She talks, I drive. Sundays were the offer, and I keep my word this Thanksgiving. The second one happened at the Yellow House. My table was not nearly big enough, so my sister brought the folding one, and it did not match, and nobody in the room cared even a little. My father carved. My sister brought 3 pies for 11 people. My cousins came, the ones who still speak to me, which turned out to be most of them. Since it turns out audiences drift once the show stops changing. On my refrigerator, where a sticky note used to ask what I had bought, there is a sign now, made with markers, crooked just like the mailbox. House rules, in 8-year-old capital letters. No one owes anyone. Everyone brings a dish. We set one chair that stayed empty. The invitation had gone out through my aunt and come back declined, which is its own kind of answer, and the table was warm anyway. Standing at the stove that day, watching my family eat food nobody would ever be billed for, I finally understood what 5 years of transfers could never once have bought me. Real love does not keep a ledger, it just keeps showing up. And the day I stopped paying to be loved was the exact day I found out who had already been loving me for free, this whole time. That is my story. 5 years of rent, one question at a Thanksgiving table, and a crooked mailbox with my name finally on it. If this reminded you that you can love your family without funding them, take it as your sign. Set one boundary this week, and keep it kindly. Share this with someone who is still paying to be loved. Then drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I will see you in the next Hearthly stories.